Good morning, everyone. Thank you again for joining us for the 2024 Sloan Sports Analytics Conference. My name is Moody Sala, and I'm a first-year MBA student at MIT Sloan. It is my pleasure to introduce the panel, The Future of Sports and Sports Business. From your left and my right, we have Jessica Gelman, CEO of Kraft Analytics Group, Steve Phelps, President of NASCAR, Kate Johnson, Global Marketing Director of Sports, Entertainment, and Content Partnerships at Google, and we have Amy Latimer, Executive Vice President and Chief Operating Officer of Delaware North Group. Our panel will be moderated by Abe Medcour, publisher and executive editor of the Sports Business Journal. The panel will run for 45 minutes, and we'll leave 10 minutes at the end for Q&A. Please submit your questions via the Cadence app as we have this discussion live, and you can navigate in the panel via the schedule, and then from there, navigate to the Future of Sports panel. Questions can be submitted throughout the event, and then will be selected by the moderator. And with that, I'll turn it over to you, Abe. Thank you.
Give it up for Moody. How good is that?
Yeah.
Right?
Good job, Moody.
Great job. And all the students who put together this program, fantastic, as always. Give it up for Jess Gelman for her leadership, continued leadership of this great event.
Same.
And how about give it up for Amy Latimer's kicks? Those are, talk about a shoe game here. We got it going on. So, we want your questions. We are talking about the future of sports and sports business, and I'll do a question for the entire panel, kind of a jump ball. As you look at the future of sports business, what area of sports do you think could be disrupted or innovated the most? We go to events, we watch sports, we experience sports. What area is ripe for innovation? Jess, I'll start with you.
Oh man, I knew you were going to start with me. So from our view of the world, obviously data and analytics plays a huge role, and our focus is really helping our clients understand their fans better. And what we've learned, the most significant thing is the application of data, of using that data to drive the business is actually the hardest part. And so I'll give two examples in terms of innovation where we are seeing it, and I'll start with Steve and NASCAR, who we've worked with for 3 years now.
3 years.
Well, so what's interesting is they made this fantastic investment into a data garage, and we started partnering with them and identified, we'll call them data gaps, data silos, and data that needed to be created to take this work that they had done and help apply it. And so I think most specifically, we identified and did a deep dive into the number of emails that were being sent to sponsors that maybe were, that weren't relevant to the customers. And that was, maybe not understanding what emails were being served up. And so that was like a data gap. And then more recently, we've done a pretty exhaustive pricing study across all of the tracks. And from there was data that was missing from what they had built, and specifically around what were the actual products that people coming to the races were receiving. And so we added in, you not only are you coming and getting a seat at the finish line, but you have parking incrementally and these other amenities. But that has enabled NASCAR to do this end-to-end product view. And so, Steve will speak to it, but I am very, very bullish on the upside opportunity of NASCAR right now, because in thinking about now they're really knowing their fans, it's phenomenal to see and be partnering with them. My second example of innovation is in part with Google. The Rams are a shared partner of ours. The Rams are on our data warehouse. And so they're where we're helping them is on the technology and the amplifying. So Google is a partner as well. And part of it is we're going to need to engage, or are engaging Google on how to take the AI tools that they have and integrate them with the data warehouse and the data that we've created and given that foundational trusted data, which is really the hardest part of AI, and then bring that together the effort and intent of what we're going to do is say customers or fans who are coming into SoFi, serving up the right offer to them based on their previous behaviors, leveraging Google's AI. And I think those two examples are all data informed and data driven, but the end impact is the better experience for the fans and providing the right product at the right time to the right customer. And so that's the innovation that I see really taking in a way that I haven't seen previously.
Yeah, I think further to Jessica's point, as it relates to NASCAR specifically, I think just a little background, in 2019, NASCAR, a private company, the sanctioning body, merged with the public company, International Speedway Corporation, which owned 12 racetracks. Now we're one company. The way things worked previously is that it was all about just email after email after email into what was then kind of a ticket database. It wasn't the data garage that we ultimately have gone to. And, unsubscribe, unsubscribe, unsubscribe. It was awful because it was just a ticketing message. So my thought, and Jess and I had this conversation repeatedly, is for every one ticket message, how about we send them really cool content, right? We know who they are. We know their favorite driver. We know where they live. We just had a 3-wide finish at Atlanta. Amazing, one of the best races I've ever seen. 3-wide finish, the closest finish from first to third we've ever had in our 76-year history.
Wow.
And we should be serving that up as opposed to, hey, buy a ticket. The second piece, which I was both horrified and super excited about, was the opportunity. Jess and I have an annual tradition where we'll have breakfast Super Bowl morning. And a couple of years ago, we were in Phoenix, and I said, numerically, 1 to 100, where are we on our journey with data and admission? She's like, you're a 20. And I'm like, oh my God, a 20? She's like, I know, that's the opportunity. I'm so excited for you. And it was, and we've come such a long way with, Jessica and her team and what they've helped us to get to. And it is transformational for us. And there's so many other things that are part of it, but that's a foundational element of what we're doing.
Real quick for Steve's focus group, raise your hand if you watched the end of the Atlanta race on Sunday. Raise your hand if you've been to a NASCAR race in person. Okay, so you've got an audience there that you can still...
Good. Listen, I'm thrilled that those that raised their hand, the opportunity for you to go to an experience that's unlike any other, which is a NASCAR race. So feel free to reach out to me. I'll give you a nice VIP experience.
Wow, you're going to regret you said that. But no, it's great. You're going to...
Only the people in the room, though.
Right.
Yeah, I'd probably answer that question a little bit from a different point of view, right? I'm a marketer first, and so content is king. And the rise of content and the microeconomies that things like AI are going to are already enabling for fans to stand up overnight around real cultural moments. Taylor Swift and all of the stuff that was coming out of the NFL real time, right? I think there's going to be this automation both for the microeconomies that surround sports to stand up overnight and then disassemble, right? As soon as that cultural moment is over or moves on to the next trend. And then I think it's actually the power in the hands of talent. That is something that I've just seen over my career, right? Even from competing as an athlete myself through to now, the power is so much in the athlete's hand, the talent's hand, to talk about, to generate the content that they care about, the stories that they want to tell, that they know their fans will relate to. And I think that is going to help traditional leagues and brands that maybe are trying to work through an innovation in terms of brand perception. The power being in the athlete hands is only a good thing when those athletes are telling the stories that they really powerfully can tell.
And the power of the athlete's stronger than ever.
Totally, absolutely.
And just may seem pedestrian question, but you define content as what?
I mean, social first, I guess. That's where I would go always is like, what is the content that the athlete's telling? What are the tools that now AI enables in the background to help them pull, to put out content real time? Or like going to even women's sports, right? Women's sports, one of the biggest challenges right now is just like the amount of content that we need to make sure that, for example, search trends are absolutely accurate in terms of what's trending around women's sports. If it's pulling from the entire internet, right, and there's still over indexes towards there being a disproportionate amount of men's sporting content in the system, like now we can actually automate real-time articles being written around, you know, Caitlin Clark, but also all the outlier sports that aren't getting coverage right now. Like, I think that we will be able to equalize, you know, the content that's out there that is profiling and shifting paradigms in terms of what people care about.
So smarter, more information on the fan base, content. What other innovation do you see, Amy? You've been with me a long time doing this.
We have. So I agree with Jess in anticipating the needs of our fans and our guests to 100% have the right product, right price, and right distribution. But I think it's still hard sometimes for people to get to events and to get what they want and to navigate that. And if you look at Gen Zs, it's like 47% of Gen Zs have not been to a live sporting event. That for me is scary, right? I think they love the content. We all love the content. If they rely so heavily on the content, what is that balance of not going live? So I think the evolution of how we're making these experiences, of how they're getting in, how they're coming in, how easy we make it accessible, make sure it's reflective of the audience. I think people have got to start to think about their fans and do we have the people, the food, and the ability to get them into these places. And because then when they're in, that communal, we all love it, right? Why are we here? We love that aspect. I mean, fan fanatic, the communal aspect of it is wonderful. I'm a little concerned about not making it accessible financially or physically for people to continue to do it.
Other thoughts on that?
I would build on that, though. I actually think there's an opportunity to also rethink what the experience is, right? It might not be going to the Super Bowl. It might be having a Super Bowl experience, because what people are craving, obviously coming out of this pandemic, is connection, is belonging, is being together, sharing in something that they love. But that actually could, you know, what technology is totally enabling.
Manifest somewhere else.
And this is what I mean about these microeconomies that are starting to like flourish around, you know, the traditional way we've consumed sports. Like, that's totally what's evolving, is that you don't have to go to Taylor Swift's Eras Tour. You can actually go and hear a DJ play her entire Eras Tour track with people and almost have a similar experience of connection and belonging, which is what people are looking for.
Amy's point is spot on, which is the innovation that needs to be, or is happening, and we're seeing it, is around what the ticket is that is actually being offered. So there's a lot more premium, and there's a lot more just get in. And the awareness of that, like we did a really interesting piece of work with the NFL a couple years ago and looked across the entire league, and the amount and ability that it pulled people from various locations is some of the thinking that we've brought to NASCAR too. But the willingness to travel is more than I think we had thought, which changes how we market and how we try and reach people. And that's a significant shift. The other major change, and I'm interested if you're seeing this broadly, is that more and more fans are customers, or they like more than one team. So they're not, I mean, within the same sport. And it's because of the player empowerment that you alluded to. They'll say, well, I really like the Celtics, or I really like the Bruins, but I also really like this other team because of the player.
Followed Tom Brady to Tampa.
Right?
Well, I mean, that's a great.
Tampa.
But I think the accessibility of being able, especially now with streaming, to watch the games in other markets is creating a very significant shift as well.
I will say we were on panels years ago where there was a real concern about the live event experience, and you've seen numbers with Live Nation and concerts and Ticketmaster. To your point, it's higher than ever. The numbers are, so people are gravitating in big numbers back to the live event.
Well, it's the only way the artists make money. Let's be perfectly honest. There are
Right, but
more concerts.
There were
People
more
are coming,
concerts,
but they wanna
but
come.
even around the trend around sports, I mean, the NFL had the highest attendance this year in a long time. Baseball hit a big number, so people are going to events. You're seeing
Yep.
good strength at the
Increases,
track.
for sure.
Yeah. So,
But I think, it also, people want to come back after the pandemic. We've seen that.
Yes.
But if you don't give them a good experience, like we've invested
True.
millions
Right.
to create a better fan experience.
Yes.
And so this whole thing, something that we call the NASCAR experience, which is a footprint that has this massive flag and simulators and things for kids to do and autograph sessions and places where our athletes can come up and have, you can get to know them further. And you have to make it other than just the racing. Listen, the racing's the better, it's the best it's ever been. But that's table stakes, right? You have to give them more, particularly young people. They want experiences. They want to travel as packs. They want, beer decks or whatever it might be that is different than what a traditional fan wants, right? It's different. And so you better cater to them or they're not going to come back.
anything to add on that? I was just going to say that in terms of that, you do have to. Jess mentioned it. We're seeing the trend on pricing, elasticity. I mean, people will pay for good experiences. So premium. Teams can't build enough premium right now, it seems like. Are you seeing that in terms of some of your data?
I would say that we are starting to see cannibalization happening with the amount of premium.
Too much premium, you're saying?
Too much. It can be. And I think that. And what are the different types of premium, and how are you messaging what the actual offering is and how it's different? And so people are adjusting how they want to be engaging, and so. You might have, Amy, you should talk through the things that you have at TD Garden, because you've really made massive adjustments there over the years, and maybe you have more perspective on that specifically. Yeah,
I think there was a time when everybody got away from premium, right? It started to diminish and people weren't investing in it because of costs and all that. And then and we sort of went all in and decided, instead of having 3 products, now we have 9 products, because knowing our customer, what was important, that we have a product where you only pay for the tickets when you show up, right? You have buy a membership, but that killed remember, people used to have dead tickets. Like, they didn't want to ever see tickets go to waste. So I think there's a brand promise you make in premium now, right? And you might have the 7 different products, but what did you promise? How are you delivering on that promise? And it is everything from access to food and beverage to that space. Like, that is what makes a successful product now, is that that you commit to it, that every decision you make is to support that promise, because there are so many options.
Well, and I'd also just say, as the prices because of premium are going up, what you're seeing is in order to improve the overall experience, a lot of our clients, they're removing seats because they want it to be less lines.
Yes.
They want there to be less traffic on the road. And that is a pretty sizable shift, which I think plays into how we interact today, which is instant, right? I want to be able to order my Starbucks in advance and then go and get it. I don't want to wait in line. And maybe that's one of the Gen Z issues that we're dealing with. They're used to having it instantly, and so it's going to have to continue to evolve.
Watch what Steve Ballmer's doing out at Intuit Dome in terms of the fan experience there. It is dramatically different than what we're seeing. So, Kate Johnson, I want to ask you, you've been a brand marketer for a long time. You've seen the ways brands and corporations invest in sports. As we look to the future and the future of sports business, how will that change? What will brands want?
Yeah.
You should just be IP. But
well, and this is what's really interesting, because as we're having this conversation, oftentimes we're coming from the venue perspective, the live experience perspective. I do think as leagues, teams, as a live event, as you guys get more focused on what is the difference between the premium offering versus the general offering versus the at-home offering, that actually helps brands, because then it enables me to actually come to my company with a business case of okay, so for the premium customer, here's how we're going to target them. Here's what we would get out of this partnership. For the general fan, look, at the end of the day, and it depends on the brand, the localization, the audience of a local team or federation versus a national league or federation. But from my vantage point, it's always been about the numbers. Like it's audience, but it's also participation of that audience and the loyalty of that audience. That is what we're always evaluating when we look at investing in these things. How are they more tech savvy? Are they more loyal to the brands that actually partner with that entity? How do they engage with that entity? What do they want more of? And where can we like authentically integrate into that in a way that's additive? Especially from a Google perspective. Like you don't want to disrupt the fan experience.
No.
You've got to get it right. And so I think the more the leagues, the teams, the federations can be very clear on what their offering is and the bifurcation of those things, the more we can kind of come with, okay, well, here's how we can show up in a way that's helpful and additive.
And you've been a leader in investing in women's sports. Like why and what do you see in terms of the different audience engagement there?
I mean, the why is just the business proposition of the growth of this as like a genre that people care about. I think what makes me really excited, and where we certainly, even just in the 4 years that I've been at Google and where we've really focused on this, it really has been about content, right? You cannot see what you can't become. You cannot drive growth without seeing more of the thing that you want to drive growth around. And so we came at it in the beginning from the point of view of like adding more content, being a partner not just of a league, but also of the broadcaster, of the content providers, to make sure that like collectively we're all playing from the same songbook or playbook and actually putting out there a strategy that's going to grow the game, because that's good for everyone in this partnership. I think when people come at it too much from their own perspective, like here's what I need to achieve versus like what's the opportunity here, that's the differentiated opportunity around women's sports, is that everybody's all in together to grow this thing, and so everyone's trying to play their part. The WNBA has a platform called Changemaker, where we literally sit around together as leading companies talking about like what is our commitment to this sport, like how are we going to grow the game. One of the conversations I want to have with the Changemakers right now, per Caitlin Clark's announcement and joining the draft, is like how are we going to bring the prominence and the energy and the followership and even just like the cool factor of Caitlin Clark and like this massive following she has into the W to make sure that continues, right? So those are things that I think brands can help solve, but certainly not by ourselves. It has to be like a 3-party, 4-party, 5-party model.
I mean, go ahead.
Because I think, Kate, you're not, like, one of the things, in my opinion, what you've really brought to Google is 4 years ago, if I would go and search for what was the score of, and I'll just, Harvard versus Princeton, it would only show me the men's scores.
Yeah.
And now it's showing me the women's scores. And so from the perspective of access, that is, I mean, you have really driven that awareness. And so we had this data issue, this conscious, unconscious way that we were not getting access to women's sports. And Google, really with Kate, I mean, I give you so much credit, asked them, demanded that this is something that needs to be accessible. And I think, like, how do you continue to do that? Not just for women's sports, but for sports that, I mean, I am shocked by the NASCAR situation here. I watch Full Speed. It's awesome. And I feel like, oh, wow.
That was my shameless plug that I was supposed to.
Oh, sorry. You go ahead and take it from there.
I'm kidding.
No, but it's probably better that I said it, because like I'm also watching
Third party. Right.
Yeah, I'm watching it with our kids, and I haven't even shown you this photo. They're making little cardboard cutouts of race cars. That's exactly the kind of things that we want the Gen Zs to be seeing and saying, oh, okay, can we go see that in person?
And I would say, and you need NASCAR to pick up those trends and be aware of those trends. Like, what are these like subcultures that are popping? Like, if there's, you're the second person today in the last 2 days that's told me about like building a box race car, right? And then racing it either down a sled hill or whatever. How does NASCAR capitalize on that fandom that's happening at like a familial level to kind of elevate also who they're reaching? And I think this is, it's so interesting. I mean, to your point on the product piece too, we absolutely, as I was saying earlier, like we can flag to our product teams and our engineers, like, look, these huge global moments, these really incredible cultural moments are coming up. We have to get this right. We have to make sure that when people are searching, they're getting the right search answers. That is something that our teams are constantly working on. Equally, on the other side of it, it's what I was going back to in terms of like, at the end of the day, the algorithms pull from the content that's in the internet, right? And if there are just like in hand over fist more content around Lionel Messi versus like Christine St. Clair, when you look for top female, top footballers, top scorers, it's not going to feed the top female scorers. And
data issue.
It's a data issue. And so like when I look at like what can we solve there? Well, this is where I'm pumped about AI, because I'm like, all right, let's start writing articles. Let's automate this stuff. We did a partnership with The Athletic to make sure that we were putting more journalists out there to cover women's sports. That's awesome. But I think the future is also like automating the writing of these things in a way that makes sure that we right size what the search value is.
Isn't it fun in terms of, in just 20 minutes, we've talked about so many exciting things about the future, and you mentioned Messi, we mentioned, how many have, raise your hand if you have watched Full Speed on Netflix. Give Steve a little bit of an idea. It's still out there, it's great, you guys gotta watch it. Steve, in terms of storytelling for you all, easy decision to make? I know the teams, you had to get them on board a little bit, but are you seeing benefits already?
Oh, for sure. I mean, listen, again, I'll do the shameless plug. Thank you, Jess. I'll pay Jess at the end of this for that. But it's 5 episodes, and it is, we are one of the first sports that actually paid for it. We paid for the production because we knew it was that important. It was a marketing investment in our sport. And what we've seen from other sports like F1, Drive to Survive, it really had fueled their growth. And it really fueled the growth with people who were not F1 fans, right? So a higher concentration of women who were watching, people who wouldn't put F1 in the consideration set that did. And we're seeing the same thing happening, right? And whether it's kids that are using, doing, different cars that they're making or whatever that might be, that exposes our drivers in our sport from a behind the scenes standpoint, where these people are not just nuts that get into these cars going 200 miles per hour inches apart, but they're human beings, right? And they're family people, and it's just it's a great look at where our sport is. And we have already seen growth in areas that we knew we would see growth. So I've said it before, spoke to Tim Clark, who heads that area up for us this morning, and he's putting a plan together about what season 2 would look like. Our season 2 would look like more episodes. And,
You had 5 this
we
year?
had 5. F1, their new season, I'm through 5 of theirs, and they have 10. Whether ours will be 8, 10, whatever it is, I don't know. But do I envision us having a second season? I do. And I think it's there are all kinds of other things that we need to do. Data, we have a brand new productions facility. We have a brand new media deal that will start next year, which was almost $7.7 billion. But importantly, 3 new partners in addition to our 2 incumbents that are going to be pushing that NASCAR message. So it's all these foundational things that will help with the growth of the sport.
Can I ask a follow-up question, actually?
Of course.
So I'm curious, as you've launched this series, and you paid attention to the fan, how has the audience changed? And are there any trends that you're able to follow in terms of new audience sets that you can kind of form relationships with more meaningfully?
Yeah, so it's still early, right? Because it launched 4 weeks ago.
Okay.
And so there's still a lot of learning that's happening. With that said, because of the things that we had done in 2020 around social justice and DE&I, we have a new fan base that has come. And in the last 3 years, they tend to be more female, 18 to 34, and people of color. Well, for 15 years as the brand person at NASCAR, before I was in my current role, I wanted to bring new fans to the sport, younger and more diverse. Kept saying that. It was like a mantra. We've got to get younger and more diverse. Until there was a flashpoint of 2020 and what we did, no one was buying it. They weren't buying what we were selling. They do now, right? So I look at 3 components of it. Our own employee base, where we're seeing young people, women and people of color come to our sport as employees. Ownership, Michael Jordan, Pitbull, others that are now coming to the sport. Justin Marks, younger, more diverse. And then the fan base. And it's heartwarming, gratifying, and actually very exciting as we look at the future.
Well done.
Yeah, it has been real progress. I live in Charlotte and I see it. Couple questions here, keep them coming. Couple questions about women's sports. I love what the Professional Women's Hockey League has done. I think that's been an incredible story. There's a couple of questions about where you all see the growth of women's sports, and one specifically here, what did you all think about the 3-point competition between Steph versus Sabrina as a marketing initiative for women's sports? I loved it.
Yeah.
Yeah.
I thought it was
Why-
great.
Yeah.
I was
Basketball. Are you basketball too?
Yeah.
Yeah. Okay.
Yeah. Well, no, I didn't play basketball, but
Amy and I both played in college. So, I mean, so first, I think big kudos to Sabrina.
Yeah.
Because I transparently, I was floored that she was able to handle that kind of pressure, which wasn't
Absolutely.
just the pressure to perform, but I mean, people were comparing. I don't think it was like Battle of the Sexes, but
no.
but she really just performed. I mean, that is really hard, and I think is a tribute to her performance under pressure and the kind of pressure that isn't just about winning a game. It's about something so much bigger. I mean, I think everyone's probably heard what maybe could or should have been done better. That would just be my perspective. I think she should have gone second. And I mean, Sue Bird pointed out, there should have been women who were also on the broadcast sharing the perspective more broadly, because there were so many new fans who came in because of Sabrina. They needed to provide that perspective on both sides. But I think from a marketing perspective, it was a home run. To have the NBA have that was when it spiked.
Yeah.
That's just incredible to think about. Maybe Sabrina in particular, but Steph also, he has done so much for women in sports. And so there's that connectivity, I think, is very powerful.
But the NBA is intentional about this, right?
Very,
so
very.
they also have the lowest percentage of, for youth sports, like they're still, like there's a 1% change, where the other sports, baseball and everything else, right? So and back to the Gen Zs, like the NBA is doing things to keep them engaged. I'm excited about the other women's sports. I'm excited about women's hockey, women's, obviously women's soccer continues. If I can just take a small moment, this fun little fact, we've had the Bean Pot in Boston forever. It's men's hockey tournament, BU, BC, Northeastern, and Harvard. And the women have had a Bean Pot forever, but have never played at the TD Garden. It literally took 10 years to get this event to come this year. And they typically had about 1,500 people when they had their neutral sites. 10,700 people showed up.
Awesome.
Little girls in their jerseys.
That's awesome.
That's to see it.
That's amazing.
And it took all the schools, it took a lot of people, but I bring that up because I feel like that's a very national moment. You need those other moments that just the local team from Braintree got to go see these college athletes in these spaces that it hasn't been. So I feel like there's the microcosm and then that national. We need to do all of that.
Yeah, do not sleep on women's sports. It's been very powerful. I know that we had 16,000 for PWHL in Toronto. You and I talked earlier, there was 60,000, I think, for the women's WSL
Yep.
Emirates Stadium, I believe,
Yep.
for the women's league in the UK. So the numbers we're seeing are real. I probably get more questions asked about people wanting to invest in women's sports than I do in anything else. The other question I get asked a lot, maybe uncomfortable for the panelists, but international globalization of sport. That's going to be the future. We saw what the Saudi PIF deal did with Live. We saw them invest with the ATP just this week as a big sponsor of the ATP Tour. Is globalization just a realization that's going to happen? And how do you see it playing out? We see what Messi's impact has been in MLS. What's your point of view in terms of just the overall space?
Yeah, I don't see how it doesn't now. I think it's I would say proven. I'm not sure everyone loves it, but I don't know how you get that unwound at this point, right? And I think it's the investment piece, and I think whoever's going to benefit from that financial, if people are looking for that platform, they're looking for those resources, I think it's going to continue. I don't think it changes.
Other thoughts?
For us, we are investing heavily in the expansion of NASCAR. So we have a series in Mexico, a series in Canada, a series in Brazil, a series in Europe, and we're looking at other countries, which surprises a lot of people. People just think about what we call our Cup Series, which is our top series. But it's coming, and what we're exploring is, all right, are we going to do this on our own, invest on our own, or are we going to do something with our race teams and invest in, trying to create something different, outside investment? There's a lot of opportunity there, and we think, selfishly, that we have the best motorsports racing in the world. We believe that. The competition itself. We had more passes this weekend in Atlanta than F1 will have in their entire season. It was insane,
Yeah.
right? And then And then just one other piece of that is one of the champion, Daniel Suarez, who won the Mexico Series championship 9 years ago, he won this race this past weekend in, again, the closest finish we've ever had, first to third. People want to see people like themselves winning. So it's Daniel Suarez, Bubba Wallace. We have this pipeline of women that are coming through our ranks. And in a year or two, we're going to have women again at our Cup Series. The last one we had kind of full-time was Danica Patrick. Yeah. People want to do that. And how cool, right? How cool is for women's sports in general to have a moment? How cool it is to have, several women and people of color that are competing at the highest level of NASCAR with men, right? And that is something that we think is, again, a point of difference that we need to make sure we're taking advantage of, and we think we can.
I think on the globalization, I mean, if you clearly the escalation of owning a team is been monumental, and so historically sports teams have been small family-run businesses, and they're still. I mean, most teams are 100 to 200 people, like max. They're small, but the Commanders obviously at $6 billion. That's a lot of. That's incredible. And so if you look to across business, especially in the United States, your Fortune 50, they have those outside investments. So it's not that surprising that it's coming in, because I think I understand the concern, but it's also that it provides money for reinvestment to improve the overall sport. And so it's being managed across financial institutions and more broadly. And I think the bigger question is, as an industry that is generally smaller, what are the safeguards that we can and should be thinking about putting in place to address maybe some of the concerns, because we are such a public face, right, to out into the world.
And I think that there's a lot of money on the sidelines willing to invest, and sports right now is a very dynamic space for investors. Would you all agree?
Yes.
Yeah.
Very much so.
Yes.
Great questions here. So this is your panel, so let's get to them. Anybody can answer these if you like. First, what do you think about the impact of analytics in sports in the next 10 to 15 years on sport itself and on the viewers? So what do you think about the impact of analytics in sports on the sport itself and on viewers? Anybody?
I'll start with this one.
Please do.
Pretty sure.
It was a good idea.
So
This question is for Jessica.
no, because he said on the sport itself, not on the fans. So
Yes.
from my
On
perspective,
sport itself and on the viewers.
Okay, well we'll go to I think this will be interesting for the viewers too. So for me, when I was studying sports and sports psychology when I was in college, it was all about trying to understand what the players were actually feeling and what they were experiencing and how that might play out in their performance. And so if I'm, as a fan, where I think AI can come in is to be able to see the players and understand what they are feeling from their visual reactions. I think it would be very cool if there's indications of mental acuity or stress or whatever it might be, and if there could be real time for the fans to be able to have some perspective of that, that analytically would be very powerful. Of course, it would be helpful for the teams to have that, to say maybe, hey, this player is really weak on something right now, or and it doesn't necessarily have to be an injury or something like that, but they're mentally not there. Like that comment I made about Sabrina earlier, her mental strength is incredible, but what if you just are having a little bit of an off day? And that's the part of analytics that we're coming to on the first panel that was in here with Paul Tudor Jones and Jonathan Kraft. They were talking about the intangibles. And as we become more sophisticated and more data, or I guess it really is data creation, I think our understanding of what is actually playing out is going to be so much deeper and more exciting. So we're early on the analytics and the connectivity to the person and the player, and that's really exciting to me.
I think it's going to change. I actually think women's sports, because women's athletes, women's sports typically, especially from a training perspective, we've been so underinvested in terms of uniquely identifying female athletes and how they respond to certain training, how they were, even the size of like the ball, right? Like I actually think 10 years is far enough out that I think the data and analytics around helping female athletes, watching women's sports, seeing how the nuance of the physicality of a female versus a male like matters to the game. I think it's going to change things that are like fundamental that we always took as like the, principle and evolve them, right? Like we might see like the length of games change. We might see the size of balls change.
Yeah.
We might see even like the traditional roles that and sizes that people play in different positions evolve. And I think in women's sports that disruption is going to be so much greater because we've underinvested for so long in the things that actually matter in terms of the data, the performance, the health, the analytics of the athlete themselves.
If I could just add, I think also there is all of this other content about the athletes and about the game that is still not as visible. As much as you think there are cameras and insights and everything, not just the athletes, can you imagine scanning a GM sitting there watching the game and be able to understand, like,
That would be fun.
you have a noise meter, can you imagine having a,
Blood pressure meter?
blood pressure meter or a stress meter, like those things, there is still a lot to, I think, unlock in the experience, not even just, in person, but I think from a viewership standpoint, and people I think they are starved for the behind the scenes, and I think that data will drive that opportunity.
But not just live viewing, I think from a content creation
you're
standpoint,
right.
moving forward. I mean, you think about our vehicles and you have, man or woman in the vehicle driving, and then you've got data that's spinning off the vehicle itself, and, heart monitors and different things that you're seeing, different camera angles as they're doing it and as they're crashing or whatever that might be, that are opportunities for the fan to understand what happened with that crash. It was a 60 G spike. What does that mean? And what did the safety equipment do to try to protect that driver and what it is they're doing? And I think that will be interesting for people because they're starved. They're starved for things that they don't have access to today. And I think that's all changing.
Great questions. I'll try to get to them all. With the focus on younger and more diverse audiences, does building more robust virtual experience create a net increase of attendance, or is there a risk of cannibalizing in-person attendance with virtual?
I'll start. Again, it's difficult for us because we are not like stick and ball sports. We're different. We're proud of the difference. We need to lean into that difference. So we have a driver who won the most races last year. His name's William Byron. He's 25 years old. William Byron had never set foot in a vehicle until he was 15 years old. But what he did do is he was doing sim racing, which is iRacing, which is a John Henry company. And it is so lifelike that you can understand where the talent lies, right? And so it's virtual racing. So we have virtual racing leagues. It's a thing. It's it happens to be sponsored by Coca-Cola because we need a plug for the sponsor. And it's NASCAR. It is, but what a cool thing, right? What I do know is that we have athletes that are coming through simulation racing, that are getting into vehicles and then competing at the highest levels of our sport. What I do know is that if you were an NBA 2K champion worldwide, you're not playing in the NBA. You're just not. Yeah. That's the difference maker for us. Again, we are different. And I think the virtual world for us, we see as a positive, both from a fan development standpoint, a driver development standpoint. It's there for the taking, and it's accelerating, which is exciting for us.
I think people want it to be additive. I think they want it to get to the fans that they might not have, that if this is the way that you're going to interact with my sport, I mean, your exact point, I think the reason why so many kids now know all these other players way back when was because they played, they're playing Xbox. Yeah. They focused on their team. Well, then they knew. Then fantasy sports got you interested in across. So I think that next chapter is hopefully getting to the fans that might not. If this is the way, if I'm 5'1" and I want to pretend to be LeBron James, have at it. Like that's what we should give them the ability to do it. I hope it doesn't prevent them from eventually wanting to go see it live. But if that's how they're going to engage, we need that engagement.
I would just say that I think the intent of the question is that it's finite. I think the point is that the world is getting smaller, and so to be able to have to go and go into a virtual environment in another country and feel like you're at the event and have it translated into your language in real time, everything that's happening, that is growth. That's not diminishing. And for the live sports and in person, we just need to continue to evolve and grow and disrupt ourselves. And from what we're seeing, that is what's happening. You mentioned Steve Ballmer's Intuit Dome. I'm really interested in how that, I mean, it's creative, it's different, it's an alternative way from what has been happening. I mean, SoFi just a few years ago. So I think it's going to be, I believe we're going to have to continue to innovate. And fortunately for us, the ownership structure and the people who are owning teams or leagues are disrupting themselves. They are trying to get better. They have had success in other industries and they're bringing it into sports. And that to me, one of the other things that we're kind of seeing overall is the more owners having multiple businesses that they're overseeing. From our view, that's a net positive. Because these are people who are recognizing this as a business. They have more centralized capabilities. They're investing in more meaningful ways. We did some interesting work with the NFL, like a staffing survey where we did a comparison and we cut the data differently for conglomerates versus standalone teams. And like a couple things that stood out were, one, the amount of staff that were available at the conglomerates and the extensions of what they were able to do. But the second thing, and this was probably more interesting, we went and did like a cost per acquisition analysis because the staffing survey was like, how much are people spending on staff and on all of the different elements, not just to sell a ticket. So we did cost per acquisition, cost per service, and cost per retention. And what was really surprising to us was that the acquisition cost and the retention cost were actually the same, but the difference was that the retention, they were spending twice as much money. And so the conglomerates were willing to make that investment in ways that we weren't seeing from the single entities who didn't have that broader depth of information.
Her point on, I would say, multi-team ownership, very, very interesting. Harris Blitzer Sports, Kraft Sports Group, Monumental Sports and Entertainment, what Stephen Ross is doing in Miami. I mean, these are really interesting businesses that you all should keep your eye on. A couple here, how will AR, VR impact fan engagement in the long term? Anyone have a thought there?
I mean, ticketing, I think it just hit on it with just the fact that like a fan can buy a ticket, have an experience that is almost real, but not real, right? And have that living in a totally different country is gonna change everything. And I think it's incumbent upon the brands, the teams, the leagues to make sure that like they understand who that fan is, that they understand for brands in those markets who that fan is, because that's like a whole other opportunity to tap into from a revenue stream perspective. For sure.
Well, COSM, who's one of the sponsors of the conference, is doing these immersive. And I actually went and visited the Sphere when I was out in Vegas for the Super Bowl. I mean, these things are technically beyond. They are so impressive, and so again, I think it's additive and will create a different and unique experience. What I'm most interested in is what are the learnings from the COSMs and the Spheres that are going to be brought back to the venues in time.
Well, you think about this one idea that that we're contemplating, which is in real time participating in the race. So the race is going on with 40 cars. You are the 41st car, and you're participating as part of that AR/VR experience, which would be really cool. Right? I'd crash and I'd finish last, but
that would be something that everyone would enjoy. For all the panelists, 5 years in, do you see legalized sports betting as a net positive, neutral, or negative? Good question.
Oh, really good question.
I think for us, and we've talked about different kind of points of entry, sticky points, right?
Right.
Sports betting to me is a sticky point. The revenue that would spin off from sports betting, great. I want to create someone who wouldn't consider NASCAR ever in their consideration set, but if they think that sports betting is a way to get them to participate in our sport, or video games, or live event attendance, or the Netflix show, or whatever it might be, I don't care where they come from. I just want them there, right? It is really about growing fandom. And I think for our sport, the partnerships that we have in sports betting are a net positive.
I'm with Steve. I think there is the benefit of that connectivity. Even if, there's sports betting, there's the gamification of everything, of how long is the anthem, to whatever we can get people to engage with. I think, look, it's our responsibility as this is just to make sure that we are doing and making sure that we're putting in the right safeguards for any kind of gaming, and making sure that it's, I think it is monitored. I think that's our responsibility as it continues to grow, and to make sure, listen, it's been happening behind the scenes forever. It's now being brought to the forefront. I think teams are benefiting probably more from sponsorship than actual the gaming institutions that are on it. And hopefully maybe bringing it forward that we'll have less of some of those issues. I think we just need to make sure that we are educating people and giving support for gaming in general.
Yeah, I would just add there, from a data perspective, moving it from the illegal world that it had previously lived in into one where there's a relationship and support for when behaviors start to veer in a way that we can help support. I think that's very important. But I think also from a pure data perspective, on the fan side, we talked about the engagement. That's just really powerful. And more than that, like the ability and changing of what's happening with betting for players, and the focus on player-specific bets versus who's going to win the game. Yeah. I think that's an interesting change that I think that I'm interested to see how that evolves, especially as what we're seeing in the college with NIL, and there's more specific to a person. I wonder how that's going to change and evolve gambling and the player-specific gambling in the future.
Anything to add, Kate, on that?
Not really.
It's been interesting to see there was such hand-wringing 5 years ago about what it would mean and what it would do.
Yeah.
I had a top executive stress to me at Super Bowl that a lot of the increase we're seeing in sports television ratings has been directly attributable to legalized sports betting. We are seeing some areas of ethical and integrity issues still popping up.
Sure.
So that's always the one that we got to keep our eye on. All right, less than 7 minutes. This is the fun part. We go to a little bit of quick hitters. We go around the horn. They have to keep their answers tight, short, and here we go. We've been very positive about sports business. What's the headwind you're most concerned about? Amy Latimer.
I am concerned about the Gen Zs, about making sure that they're engaged.
So young fans.
Young fans.
Same thing. How do we make sure that they stay engaged, and actually, rather than force them into our model, how do we pay attention to the models that they need?
Yeah. Where do we meet them where they are?
And so to do that, we need younger, smart people to know how to identify. That's what Michael Rubin was telling you.
Yep.
In terms of Steve, what's a headwind potentially in our businesses?
Yes.
Is that,
So you want to keep it quick?
no, not that. That's not yes, no.
Not
yet.
that quick?
Not yet.
I think, I agree. I think that young people's, we have to have them as sport anyway. We have to have them understand that they're welcome to participate, right? That this is a place for them. Because, you look at, we just finished our media rights deal, 7 years. I have no idea what it's going to look like in 7 years. Right. And it really is going to be dependent on who is viewing, right? And how they're viewing. We kind of hedged our bet with broadcast cable and streaming, and a combination of cable and streaming as well. I don't know. It's a complete unknown.
Your headwind?
I'm really looking at college athletics and how important that is for the growth of sports and talent. And there's a very small percentage of college athletes that are being impacted by NIL, but it's threatening to derail college sports, and that has pretty long implications for how the U.S. does in the Olympics, and so that's at the top of my list I'm thinking about.
I think the athletic director is the hardest job in sports today and has been for some time. Jess Gelman, I'll start with you on this one. The most transformative athlete we will see over the next decade is?
Wow, that's a great question. I mean, I'm going to have to go with Caitlin Clark.
Yeah.
And I mean, I will say that I've been a long time women's sports fans, basketball, soccer, all of these. But what she has done and the poise that she has handled it is really beyond my comprehension. And I think for someone like her to be able to, I mean, I think a lot of people will look up to it, but the influence and the number of new women and men, frankly, who will change how they're shooting, be able to deal with those pressures, come into sports, and I think really in the Midwest too, I think is really I think it's really interesting. Yeah. So she's changing the game in multiple ways.
Steve Phelps.
You know, for me, it's not a single athlete. You know, I'll bring it back to NASCAR. It is the role of women in our sport and people of color in our sport. It literally is changing the face of the game for us. And so I think over the next 5 to 10 years, it is going to be, it'll be a movement. And I think it's really cool that you have a sport where people's perception of the brand is that it's a bunch of Southern white guys, and it's not. You know, for our existing drivers, the state we have the most drivers from is from California. Not North Carolina, not Georgia, not Florida. But I do, as these young girls and women and more people like Daniel Suarez coming from Mexico or Brazil or Canada and Europe and other places where we're going to have these participants come, it's going to be exciting for us.
I'm excited for this summer's Olympics because if you think, I mean, when you think about how much technology evolves every 4 years, every time there's a new games and how audiences engage with the games using those new technologies, that's fascinating to me. But also, like, when you think back about Tokyo and Simone Biles and mental health, like, she elevated an entire conversation around mental health and sport. And so I'm looking forward to what that version is going to be that changes the conversation around the Olympics and sports coming out of the summer in Paris.
Great. Amy?
I'm excited about the 10-year-old girl who wants to beat Caitlin Clark. The girl, that next. When was the last time you heard about a $400 secondary ticket for those games, for a college women's basketball game? It's unheard of.
Never.
So I'm with Jess a little bit on that wave. I think what it's done from a media perspective, kids, I'm excited about it.
Start with Kate on this one. A lot of students here. Advice to young people who want to get in the sports business or want your job is?
Raise your hand. I mean, I think one of the early on in my career, the best piece of advice, there's no wrong choice. You just have to start. And I think, and then it's taking advantage of where you're beginning and making sure that you are getting into every brainstorm you can get into, asking all the questions, trying on as many parts of the industry as you can with the opportunity that you have to figure out the path you want to take.
Very good. Steve Phelps, advice to young people.
I think it's part of it, to add on kind of moreover, is that understand what it is you want to do, right? What do you want your path to be? Because it's different for everyone. Like, we all had our own path, and mine was about, working too many hours and I was driven to do that. That's not everyone's path. That's okay. Understand what you want it to be, and then find the opportunities to get where you need to go through relationships, networking, whatever that might be.
Figure out the thing that differentiates you, and then invest in practice in that. So for me, that was analytics, and I think that there isn't one right answer on how to progress, but figure out where you are differentiated and bring that to bear.
Stop looking for the perfect job, right? If you have 70% of what that job needs, then put yourself in it. People worry too much about, I don't have this, I don't have that. Just get the job. You will get help. You will surround yourself with good people. Do not think that everything has to check every box. Take a chance.
and be approachable. Like, you've got opportunities to come and say hi to these legends of sports business, so take your time and do that. All right, last question for Jess Gelman, specifically for you. You lived it. I've watched The Dynasty. Is it fact or fiction?
Was it a dynasty? I mean, yes.
No, the Apple TV series. Is it fact or fiction?
So, well, I mean, I've only seen the first 3. I haven't watched the 4th, but yeah, I mean, it is
pretty hold
true.
truths to what you remember?
I mean, I read the book, right? So, I mean, I learned a lot from the process. Obviously, being part of it. Look, I don't know if we'll ever see anything like that again, in terms of being able to keep people together. It was really fun through the first few episodes to go back and remember the introduction as a team right after 9/11,
Right.
and for me to be able to share that with my family, with my young kids who weren't there. That's kind of the best part of the weren't alive.
It's been fun to watch. If you haven't watched it, check it out. Steve Phelps is Bill Belichick coach next year in the NFL. I just wanted to ask. Just had to ask. All right, that was a fun session. I try to keep them on their toes. Everybody have a great rest of the day. Thank our panelists.
Thank you, guys.